All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody to another edition of FSMA Fridays for August 2018, and welcome so many familiar faces back. We see some new ones, which is always awesome. I'm very, very excited. And quite a few of you waiting even just to get in the room. So I know we got a hot topic this month and a lot of good updates. So we're just really grateful to have you make some time out of your very busy schedules to join us again. And we're going to dive right in. Lots of good stuff. So for those of you, we do see a number of you who are joining us for the first time, which is always excited to see our audience continue to grow here. FSMA Fridays has been a really fun and important part of building a community together with our colleagues and fellow practitioners and the experts over at the Acheson Group. So this is a monthly update that's actually been the longest standing in the industry. We focus on sharing all the latest and greatest FSMA related news, the constant regulation changes and updates that are coming out, obviously industry trends and what we're seeing out actually in the field. And then probably the most valuable part of this whole thing is the direct and exclusive access to the experts we are able to bring in each and every month from the Acheson Group. And we have another great one here this month we'll introduce you to here in just a moment. So really excited to keep this going, and we do this for you, and the support is great, so we will continue to bring it out. Yeah. So we've been putting this on with the Acheson Group now for, like I said, I think over 5 years. I think we just celebrated 5 years earlier this year, which has been really an honor, and they really represent the best in consulting as it relates to food safety plans, and certainly everything legal that goes along with that. And we're on the technology side here at Safety Chain with a food quality management system that really complements a lot of the work and strategy that they put in place over at the Acheson Group. So a partnership that's very, very important to us and we're very proud of, and excited to continue together. So these are short sessions, so we really power through these. Just a quick idea of what to expect, few housekeeping things. These are conversational, so we got a lot of great info, but we want to encourage you to ask questions. We do carve out some time for that at the end, but if we don't get to those, we always promise to follow up offline, and I'll also give you some info. We have a LinkedIn group, and we share a lot of the continued conversation Q&A on our LinkedIn group for FSMA Fridays, and encourage you to maybe check that out now and sign up before the end of the webinar today. You'll notice only the panelists are displayed, so your questions are coming in straight to us. And one of the common questions we will get is the recording, and as always, we will share a copy of the deck along with the actual replay itself within the next few days of the session here. And we'll do that both by email and in the LinkedIn group as well. If you do have questions, concerns, or if you have audio issues, there's a question box, and you can fire those away. And we do have a group behind the scenes here that will do our best to help you with any audio issues. If you do have some, as always, you can log in via your web or the phone option, and usually switching back and forth will do the trick. So we'll do our best to help you if you're having any technical issues from that side. In terms of what we're covering today, we always try and take a few minutes to talk about what's the latest in FSMA. So we'll talk about any updates that have come out, news-related items over the last 30 days since we last got together. And then we have a really interesting focus this month around FD 483. And Eric's going to be talking about trends in the age of FSMA, and has a lot of really good information there that I think you'll find quite valuable. And then as we discuss, we'll have a chance to ask the experts some questions there. So with that, I'm going to bring in kind of our featured friend here today from the Acheson Group, Eric Edmunds. He's been a regular contributor to this amongst many other things in the world of food safety, and he is the food safety director over at the Acheson Group. He has over 10 years of legal, regulatory, and food industry experience, and he's been a really big part of building this series with us this year, and just excited to have you back. So Eric, first let's do a little sound check, make sure you're there and you can hear us okay.
Hey Brian, yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, great to have you back. And for those of you that have been hearing Jen, she is on vacation this month, so I get to step in as the guest host. So it's great to have the old band back together here for a little bit. So with that, let's dig into some of the latest and greatest. Do you have anything that's newsworthy since we last got together for FSMA Friday?
FSMA specifically, there's a few new things. A few new guidances came out, but they're in regard to facility registration this month that could be of interest to some folks. And just kind of a question and answer around how facilities are supposed to register and things. And then another specific FSMA aspect is the FDA has recently approved a new third-party accreditation body for third-party audits in the Foreign Supplier Verification Program aspect for accredited bodies performing audits in the international realm, not domestically. So that's if you're looking at foreign suppliers and new auditor requirements, that may be of interest to you as well. In a general FDA aspect, they've been busy, obviously. They're expecting new produce guidance sometime soon, and they've actually, and of interest to me, and not necessarily of FSMA import, but labeling issues, they've announced that they're going to be reviewing their standards of identity for different products in relation to nutritional aspects of things. So things like soy milk versus cow's milk. And the standard of identity for milk is something that FDA is going to be looking into over the next while that I find interesting. So things are going on, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's an understatement, right? They have not taken the summer off. It's been a busy summer. So I think there's a lot of people on here that those last two items definitely impact. So speaking of that, I think our focus this month is quite interesting, and I'm glad that you actually have put together some real detailed info around it. So I'm actually going to do something a little different. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter, because I know you've put together a lot of good content, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that now, Eric, and send that over. And for everybody who's on the line here, he's put together a lot of great content, because one of the things we like to do after these sessions is share the deck with you. So this will be as much of a reference as anything. Although I did challenge Eric to see if he could read through all the legalese, but we don't want to put you all to sleep. So your screen looks great, and I'll let you kind of share through this stuff, because you got a lot of good stuff here.
Okay, sounds good. So FSMA focus for this month is FSMA's been around for a while. Compliance dates have come around, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the FDA Form 483, just to kind of overview kind of where those are going. And luckily this year I attended the IFP International Association for Food Protection Conference, and an FDA employee presented some really great information on what they've seen in 483s in the first 6 months or so of 2018. So that's what it'll go over. And like Brian said, I do have a couple slides with a lot of words, but those are at the end, and those are going to be there for your reference later, because they include the full legal citation, but I'll focus on the summary and just kind of speak to the overall concept of each of the citations for the presentation. So just to start off, to give a quick summary, what is the FDA Form 483? The Form 483 is more or less a notification letter that an FDA inspector leaves with a facility at the end of an inspection. It kind of includes their observations and the things that they've discussed with the company or observed on the floor of the production area. It's not really intended to be an all-inclusive list of everything that they observed. It typically focuses on the major issues that they find objectionable. And then the FDA investigator uses that as the notification for the facility, and then also has a narrative report that they take back to their field office, and they combine those, and then what the 483 does is the company responds to the objectionable observation, and FDA takes those responses in inclusion with the 483 and that narrative report and decides what steps to take next. It may be the end of it. It may lead to warning letters and everything like that. So in the end, what happens when you receive a 483? It sets off a little timing period where you want to respond quickly and interact with FDA as much as possible to make sure you're getting the right answers. Sometimes it's a back and forth process, phone calls with a decent amount of FDA officials on them for that sort of thing, but there's a timeline for responding, and hope that you can make corrective actions to the point where no warning letters and no further action is necessary. When it comes to who can see 483s, you may think about this as something that you would look into for supplier verification or just looking at past performance and history. Anyone can see a 483, but they're not always very accessible. There's some websites that charge fees that have access to or have requested large amounts of them, but in the end, anyone can request 483 with the Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA request to the FDA. And for some of those bigger ones that FDA happens to receive lots of requests about, they do keep a website that allows you to kind of see the most commonly requested ones. But for anything specific, to guarantee that you'd be looking into all of them, a FOIA request, or there's an option which I'll get into on this next slide, the FDA Reading Room has some good information, as well as this new FDA data dashboard that they put out. So in terms of getting access to review 483s as suppliers, there are some default websites, and those are listed right here on the web page, but or on the slide deck. But it's not necessarily always out there in the open. I do recommend opening up this FDA data dashboard and playing around with it to see if you find it useful, because it is a great tool that has a lot of good information in respect to not only 483s, but all inspection data from different companies, and you can search by company name. It's just a really good bit of information. But being that the focus of this presentation is the actual 483s and trends in the preventive controls age of FSMA, this is basically a list of the 8 most common or 7 most common violations that the FDA inspectors are leaving in 483s with food facilities. So we'll talk about it in a little bit, but they are really going from the education to enforcement mode. But you'll see from the examples that a lot of these are relatively basic or kind of basic, I guess, violations that seem like the company should be a little further ahead of the game than this. So, for example, this first one, conducting a hazard analysis, that includes a partial hazard analysis, or they didn't complete a hazard analysis at all. So it's kind of a broad issue that's the very first step of the new regulations for the food safety plan, is conducting the hazard analysis of all your processing steps. So it could be a wide range of companies just not even recognizing it, or not being trained to properly conduct a hazard analysis and not having that completed. The next most common, preparing the written food safety plan. So the first 2 steps of the preventive controls are the 2 most common citations for domestic facilities so far in 2018. As far as this equipment and utensils and sanitation of food services, those go back to the original GMPs, just not good condition, not adequately cleanable. And that's one of the citations that's really long because it's quite broad. It includes all aspects of your equipment and sanitation procedures. But one of those ones that you would hope companies would be doing better at, especially even those newer companies that are working hard to implement written food safety plans and things like that, that they wouldn't have dropped the ball on some of those general good manufacturing practices. The next few, I'll go back to these preventive controls and actual having written procedures to conduct things within the written food safety plan. So monitoring, this can range from anything from the monitoring of sanitation activities or different areas and verification of preventive controls. That goes back to having that preventive controls qualified individual and qualified individuals trained on the floor to actually verify that certain parameters are being met within your processes, cooking temperatures, or verifying metal detectors, lots of things like that. And then having the preventive controls qualified individual sign off those within 7 business days of that happening. Corrective action procedures. This one ends up being a little bit difficult for a lot of companies, just in the sense that so many corrective actions take some subjective nature and are dependent on exactly what's happening. But it is important to have those actual corrective actions for when a preventive control deviation occurs that is the go-to, which includes final disposition of product or investigation of product, and those sort of things. So while some of these common regulatory citations for 2018 fall into the GMPs, the large majority you see FDA is really starting to focus on the new preventive controls and the actual written food plans that companies need to implement under the new requirements. So as we see, they really are moving from the educate before and while they really are following that mantra, the educate before and while we regulate. It is a good sign, in my opinion. There are lots of 483s in a sense, but there haven't been a substantial increase in warning letters. So it seems like a lot of companies are being able to address the issues in 483s, and FDA's been willing to work with them to not issue further regulatory action in those senses and allowing them time to learn and implement their programs. I'm really curious to see exactly what happened with some of those companies that hadn't conducted hazard analysis and what type of resources or timelines FDA gave them before re-inspections and things like that. But it really does seem the trend is just that slow movement into enforcing the specific preventive controls issues. And we can expect that that will continue as time goes on, and FDA just expects companies to really be understanding the actual rule and its implications and knowing how to implement compliant programs for it. I wanted to touch just briefly on, I'll do produce first, just because there was some recent news that I didn't mention in the previous slide around produce, not necessarily in the last month, but Scott Gottlieb had released a letter to all the state departments of agriculture, more or less, through the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, as they're the ones that are going to be doing most of the produce inspections. If you've noticed, FDA has given out a lot of money, and I think it's up to 47 states that have been granted money in the program so far for implementing the produce safety rule. And there's kind of two tiers of that money. One involves just kind of a training program for the states where they're looking into all their farms, but then FDA will still be conducting the inspections, or states can opt into a second tier where they would actually be conducting the inspections as well, unless they're a for-cause inspection or something like that, where FDA will still have the ability to step in. But the letter that he put out in that one is that produce farms will not likely be facing 483s. There's likely to be a unique form for produce companies that is still under development, but they're not planning on really starting produce inspections for another little while. And so they're still working on that. And that, along with the new produce guidance, will be the big news in that, and in the end, a change from FDA's normal operating procedures to adapt to industry that they've never regulated before. So 483s may be disappearing for or may never appear for the produce safety rule. As far as the foreign supplier verification program, I didn't have the exact data for specific violations in 2018 for foreign suppliers, but we do know that FDA has kind of transferred into more of an enforcement role with foreign supplier, with brokers and importers and everything, with the foreign supplier verification program as well. The last data from 2017 ended up being a little bit similar to this shift to the preventive controls, where it was failure to have a written verification plan or supplier program for your for food you're importing. But I expect that will continue, and FDA has announced that they expect to do a lot more FSMA inspections coming up. But just to touch on that as well, so the list of top violations that I had seen or I listed for domestic facilities, I also have some of the information for foreign facilities for those that are importers of food that have foreign programs and things to look out for in those supplier programs. So just kind of in general, the trend was somewhat similar, although some of the major, or the having no hazard analysis, having no written verifications for preventive controls were some, but then it did have the same inadequate sanitation controls. The written preventive controls was another issue in foreign facilities, but the ones that were largely different that weren't a part of the domestic facility list was the number 3 listed violation was pest exclusion, failure to exclude pests from the facilities. And then the 4th with that was not adequate facilities. So that includes things like hand washing sinks, not enough toilets for the employees, or inadequate plumbing. So a little bit of a variation. They went back, they still had the 3 that focused on preventive controls, the written preventive controls, written verification for preventive controls, and having not conducted a hazard analysis. But after that, it went straight to the plant construction, adequate facilities, sanitation controls, and pest exclusion. So a little bit different violations and violations for foreign facilities under the new trends, but they are going in the same way. And I expect that over this, it may take longer, being that some of those areas don't have the same construction standards and things that they're working on getting some of those GMPs and actual facility maintenance in order, but they are moving and having the same expectations as far as transferring and trending towards writing them up for the actual new preventive and written food safety plan requirements. So as we mentioned, we kind of included it, and it's a lot of slides just to make sure it's readable. But these are the specific citations of and exactly what the citations on these 483s are including. So the basic ones, this very long one with equipment and utensils, just it could be a wide variety of issues. And unfortunately, during the IAFP presentation, the FDA presenter did not give specifics on which of those were the most, but as you see, it continues and is a general condition issue for the next 3 slides. And then here are the last few of them, sanitation, the written procedures, and the verification activities. But yeah, with that, we'll have that there for you when the slide deck becomes available, and obviously the recording will be available too. But I'll turn it back to Brian, but we'll open it up for a question and answer.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And I appreciate, as we mentioned, we'll share all those slides with you, and I'm glad you put that in there for reference. A little disappointed you couldn't read through them all, but we'll try it next time. So we do have a couple of minutes to dive into some questions, Derek, that came in during the course of that. So I'll fire these off and grab what you can here. So the first one was from Mike. Said, I've been told that processing aids will have to be labeled in the near future. Is that true?
That is not for certain, I guess. That's a rumor, but I can't necessarily say whether it's true or not. So unfortunately, that one's you just have to wait on FDA for some final announcement or words on that one.
Got it. Still in the rumor category. Okay. Another question came from Michael, and it was regarding Form 482. Is that something the FDA issues just domestically, or do they issue internationally as well?
Both. So the 482 ends up being more or less what they give you when they get there. That says we're here to do an inspection. It's the beginning one, but yeah, they do both of those. Foreign, it works a little differently. So you'll notice that like they have specific guidance for what it means for a foreign facility to reject an inspection. And that's what would happen if you didn't accept the 482 or reject an inspection at that point. But the difference in foreign facilities with that is sometimes foreign facilities do get some notice about an inspection because travel. The FDA doesn't want to send someone around the world and have a facility be closed for the season type of thing. So okay. They do get some notice, but they do follow the same general procedures.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. Time for a couple more here. So one from Natasha. What are the basic trends for animal foods for FSMA? So that's a pretty broad question, but do you have anything top of mind as it's related to animal foods in FSMA that you're seeing?
The one thing the FDA has been focusing on, but it's not in a direct FSMA, it's kind of more of a research area, is the overall nutritional deficiencies and toxicities issue with pet food, pet food specifically. So I know animal food's a pretty broad category now, but they're looking into, I think it's formulations that are high in legumes and certain other products that cause heart issues in dogs specifically. But as far as the animal feed rule, as far as inspections, FDA is starting to move into the realm of looking into the human food byproduct issues being used in animal feed a little bit more. As far as the trend in actual animal feed facilities, I haven't seen anything specific so far, but as we know, those, I guess the compliance for deadlines for those are a little different in the fact that they're tiered because most animal feed companies had never had even good manufacturing practices before. So a lot of those inspections are very focused on good manufacturing practices and not the actual written food safety plans yet. But for the larger companies, they're starting to get into the food safety plan aspect now. But they're a year or so behind the human food preventive controls rule in that regard.
Okay, excellent. Boy, we couldn't stump you. We covered a bunch of stuff there. So great. I'm going to end with this one because I really love this. It came from Joyce because the environment here is for all of us to share, right? And so she had a note just about your educate to that shift happening from educate to regulate, and she noted that just feedback. I recently had an FDA PC inspection, and they're really enforcing educate before and while regulating, and they try to work with you and put you at ease. So I appreciate that because I think we want to have that conversation and hear what your thoughts are. So hopefully that's will help put some of you at ease as well. That is still in place there, and I appreciate you sharing that, Joyce. And Eric, I don't know if you're seeing the same thing out there. I think you were alluding to that during the presentation too.
Yeah, we are seeing the same thing, but I do appreciate Joyce mentioning that as well. I definitely learn things from these FSMA Fridays all the time as well, so I like getting the input on things like that. So yeah, it's good to hear that other people are saying the same thing.
That's excellent. Great. Well, with that in mind, Joyce and others, we encourage you to go over to LinkedIn. We've got a really great group of people collaborating and sharing ideas and thoughts like that on our FSMA Fridays LinkedIn group. So if you haven't joined a group on LinkedIn, this would be the one to start with. Just search FSMA Fridays, click join, and we'll get you entered in there and join the conversation. And we give you some sneak peeks and, again, continue the conversation. Any questions we didn't get to today, we cover there. As always, we're just so lucky to have access to Eric and his colleagues over at TAG. And so if you need some help, whether it's in the area of our topic today or anything around FSMA rules, regulations, your food safety plans, compliance, they do offer consultations and just have a wealth of information on their website, which is actually looks quite new and awesome. So you can check that out at achesongroup.com, and just couldn't recommend more connecting with those. It's one thing to have the expert in the food industry, but the legal side that you guys are able to bring as well is so unique and so valuable. And I think that really showed up here today. And on the technology side, we're here to make all of this easier. So if you're looking and overwhelmed by all of these changes and all the FSMA related stuff with compliance, we're here to help make that faster and easier for you with our food quality management system. So essentially, everything you're doing to maintain your compliance, whether it's with your suppliers and with your customers, everything through food safety plans, even quality assurance, we run that all through our cloud-based software. Got some really cool stuff we're working on, and if that's something of interest to you, want to learn more about, you can check us out over at safetychain.com as well. And a few calendar items here. So again, we'll be sending out today's recording and slides probably early next week, so keep an eye out for that. We also have our continued Beyond Compliance webinar series, which is a longer version training topic that we do each month, and you can sign up for that on our website on our events page. We'll also be offering a demo day later this week, and as always, the TAG newsletter is a must subscribe. So check them out on their website. You can sign up for that and get that info right to your inbox. And we will be teaming up again next month on the 28th. September 28th will be the next FSMA Fridays. So until then, thank you all for making time out of your busy days to join us. We're so pleased to have you continue to be part of this. Eric, thank you. Tons of great content, and really appreciate you putting all that together for us. And appreciate you being here. And wish all of you a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Great being here.